Under the blinding lights of Melbourne, the Australian Open final had wrapped up, but the real fireworks didn't even start until the last ball was hit. Sure, the match was thrilling, don't get me wrong, but what came afterward turned the entire tennis world upside down. Jan-Nik Sinner, Italy's young prodigy, didn't just claim the title. He ignited a firestorm of drama that made the match itself look like a warm-up act. His victory wasn't the only thing grabbing headlines. It was the aftermath, a messy, tension-filled unraveling of one of tennis's most personal rivalries. It all kicked off in the post-match press conference. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as Sinner strutted into the room, exuding an unshakable calm in his sharp suit, looking like a man who had all the time in the world, and none for nonsense. Cameras flashed like crazy, capturing every flicker of emotion on his face. He was the star of the moment, and everyone knew it. The questions started innocent enough. How did he approach his strategy? What did he think of his journey through the tournament? But then, like every good scandal, things took a sharp turn. A reporter went straight for the jugular, asking about his relationship with Alexander Zverev. And there it was, a split-second hesitation. Sinner's polite smile vanished, replaced by an icy glare that could freeze hell over. His words came out measured, calm even, but with the kind of edge that made everyone sit up straighter. "I respect all players on the tour," he began, his tone deceptively smooth. "But respect needs to go both ways. Not everyone gets that." Boom. The bomb was dropped, and the room practically crackled with tension. Everyone knew Sinner and Zverev didn't exactly send each other Christmas cards, but this? This was the first time anyone had gone on the record about it. He didn't elaborate, leaving the press scrambling to piece together what lay beneath the surface. Meanwhile, over in Zverev's camp, it was full-blown chaos. Reports flew around that his team was livid, and Zverev himself was a no-show for his scheduled press conference. When he finally did show up, his vibe screamed pissed off. He dodged questions about the match and Sinner's pointed remarks, but the bitterness in his voice was impossible to ignore. "Some players," he said with a barely concealed sneer, "let a single win go straight to their heads." The room felt like it had been plunged into an awkward silence. Zverev, clearly done with keeping up appearances, launched into a rant about the pressures of rivalries and how the media stirs the pot. He didn't name Sinner directly, but come on, the target of his shade was crystal clear. What followed was an absolute circus. Tennis Twitter exploded, analysts dissected every word, and fans picked apart years of subtle digs and cold stares between the two players. Old match footage resurfaced, showing Zverev's smirks and dismissive gestures, contrasted with Sinner's laser-focused demeanor. Their rivalry, long treated as background noise, had now stolen center stage. In the days that followed, Sinner kept popping up in interviews, calm as ever but not pulling punches. When asked about Zverev again during a popular sports talk show, his response was a masterpiece of controlled savagery. "Actions speak louder than words," he said with a calm smile that somehow felt sharper than any insult. "Winning is one thing, but how you carry yourself afterward, that's what defines you." It was subtle, sure, but the message landed like a gut punch. Zverev, already battling a less-than-stellar reputation thanks to accusations of arrogance and off-court scandals, now found himself completely outmaneuvered. The public couldn't help but contrast Sinner's squeaky clean image with Zverev's more, colorful reputation. And just like that, the Australian Open wasn't just a tennis tournament anymore, it was a soap opera. Fans picked sides, memes flooded the internet, and debates raged on about who was in the right. Sinner's cool-headed confidence and Zverev's fiery defensiveness turned their rivalry into the story of the season, a clash of personalities as much as athletic prowess. The dust hasn't settled yet, and honestly, who wants it to? With egos this big and stakes this high, it's clear this isn't just about tennis anymore. It's personal. And we're all here for the drama. The media didn't just grab this story. They put it in a chokehold, dressed it up, and paraded it around like it was the juiciest scandal of the year. Suddenly, Jannik Sinner was the poster boy for humility and hard work, the hero everyone could root for, while Alexander Zverev was painted as the arrogant, brash villain you love to hate. And oh, did that narrative stir the pot. Backstage, the drama cranked up to 11. Reports flew of heated exchanges between their camps, with Zverev's team accusing Sinner's entourage of orchestrating a smear campaign. Meanwhile, Sinner's camp clapped back, claiming they were too busy celebrating a historic victory to waste time on petty theatrics. Yeah, sure. Public denials aside, insiders were already whispering that both sides were gearing up for an all-out rivalry, one that was destined to be as bitter off the court as it was electrifying on it. As Sinner's star rose, so did the microscope over his private life. The reserved and laser-focused Italian had managed to keep his personal affairs under wraps, until now. Suddenly, rumors were swirling about his romantic relationships, his endorsement deals, and his future plans. In stark contrast, Zverev's personal life was already tabloid fodder, and now every aspect of it was being dissected through the lens of his feud with Sinner. The rivalry reached boiling point at a charity event in Monaco, an occasion supposedly meant to celebrate unity and sportsmanship. Instead, it turned into the most awkward high-profile gathering tennis had ever seen. While other players mingled and posed for photos, Sinner and Zverev kept their distance, throwing daggers at each other with icy glares. The event organizers, clearly panicked by the growing animosity, tried their best to downplay the tension. But come on, anyone with eyes and a pulse could feel the friction crackling in the air. At one point during the evening, Sinner was invited to speak about his Australian Open victory. As he stepped onto the stage, every eye in the room turned toward him, including Zverev's, whose expression screamed a cocktail of irritation and disdain. But Sinner? Cool as a cucumber. He addressed the crowd with poise. "This victory isn't just about me," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "It's about showing that hard work and respect can take you to the top." The audience erupted in applause. Meanwhile, Zverev's jaw looked like it could crush a tennis ball. He stayed silent for most of the evening but stormed out shortly after, refusing to participate in a planned group photo with Sinner and the other players. By the next morning, the incident was splashed across every sports headline, cementing their rivalry as one of the most contentious in modern tennis. As the dust settled, it became clear that the Australian Open was just Act 1 of a much larger saga. Sinner's victory didn't just solidify his status as a rising star, it laid bare the deep crack between two of the sport's most talented players. Sure, their battles on the court would continue to captivate fans, but the off-court drama was what had everyone hooked. Weeks later, both players returned to their routines, but the shadow of their rivalry loomed large. Sinner was focused on building his legacy, determined to prove his victory wasn't a fluke. Zverev, on the other hand, was fighting to reclaim his reputation and silence his critics. Their paths were now inextricably linked, setting the stage for a rivalry that would define a new era of tennis. The charity event in Monaco, originally meant to showcase camaraderie among tennis elites, instead became a breeding ground for whispers and speculation. Guests reported that the tension between Sinner and Zverev was impossible to ignore. Even the seating arrangements, meticulously planned by organizers to avoid awkward interactions, seemed to highlight the animosity. Sinner was seated at the main table, flanked by former champions and esteemed guests, while Zverev was placed farther back with sponsors and lower-profile players. Observers couldn't help but notice the subtle power dynamics at play, a visual representation of their current standings, both in the sport and in public opinion. Throughout the night, Sinner exuded his trademark calm. He engaged warmly with those around him, his charisma understated yet magnetic. He posed for photos with sponsors, shared light-hearted moments with young fans, and even cracked jokes with one of the event hosts, earning laughs from the audience. His every move seemed deliberate, not in a manipulative way, but as if he was acutely aware of the scrutiny and determined to rise above it. Zverev's demeanor, however, told a very different story. Stiff and visibly uncomfortable, his smiles looked more forced than genuine, and his interactions felt transactional, like he was checking boxes rather than enjoying the event. At one point, a young fan approached him for an autograph. Witnesses later described how he scribbled his name quickly, barely making eye contact, before moving on without a word. The moment didn't go unnoticed and stood in stark contrast to Sinner's approachable warmth. By the end of the night, the divide between them couldn't have been clearer. One was the golden boy of tennis, embodying sportsmanship and grace. The other, a brooding talent whose attitude was becoming as much a liability as an asset. The world loves a good rivalry, and this one? It's got everything: talent, egos, drama, and just the right amount of pettiness. As their careers continue to intertwine, one thing's for sure: this isn't just tennis anymore. It's a goddamn soap opera, and we're all glued to the screen. The organizers, clearly in full panic mode and desperate to salvage the evening's vibe, decided to stage a group photo op featuring all the players in attendance. The goal? To project unity and good sportsmanship. The result? A hot mess. When the players assembled on stage, Sinner and Zverev naturally ended up on opposite sides of the group, separated by a sea of grinning athletes. The photographers snapped away, but even in that forced display of camaraderie, the rift between the two was impossible to miss. The Real kicker came moments later when a follow-up photo was planned with the event's major sponsors. That's when Zverev reportedly muttered something under his breath, probably not fit for polite company, and walked off, leaving everyone awkwardly staring at the empty spot where he was supposed to be. Cue the collective sigh from the organizers and the gleeful whispers among the guests. But the most talked-about moment of the night wasn't part of the planned schedule. Oh no, the drama really escalated when the two rivals had an unplanned encounter near the buffet table. Witnesses described the tension as palpable, like the kind of awkward energy when someone brings up politics at Thanksgiving dinner. The two men locked eyes, neither one budging for what felt like an eternity. Zverev's jaw clenched like he was chewing on nails, while Sinner, ever the Ice King, gave a polite nod and casually walked away without uttering a single word. That small gesture, calculated, cool, and utterly devoid of warmth, became the stuff of legend. Fans and analysts spent the following days dissecting it like it was the Zapruder film. Was it a subtle show of dominance? A deliberate snub? Or just Sinner's way of saying, "I don't have time for your nonsense"? Whatever the intent, the narrative practically wrote itself. The evening wrapped up with a charity auction to benefit youth sports programs. Items up for grabs included autographed memorabilia, private training sessions with top players, and VIP tickets to future tournaments. When Sinner's signed Australian Open racket was brought to the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. The auctioneer launched into a glowing spiel about Sinner's hard work, inspiring journey, and rise to the top. The bidding war that followed was nothing short of fierce, with high-profile attendees duking it out for the prized item. In the end, it sold for a jaw-dropping sum, cementing Sinner's status as the man of the moment. Zverev had also donated an item for the auction, a pair of custom-designed tennis shoes. But when his turn came, the enthusiasm in the room noticeably dipped. Sure, the shoes sold for a respectable amount, but the energy didn't come close to matching the frenzy over Sinner's racket. The stark contrast wasn't lost on anyone. Sinner was the golden boy, adored by fans and sponsors alike, while Zverev seemed to be struggling to claw back any semblance of favor in the aftermath of his rival's victory. As the event wound down, social media lit up like a Christmas tree. Photos and posts from attendees flooded timelines, with hashtags like #Sinner vs Zverev trending for hours. One tweet in particular went viral, a side-by-side comparison of Sinner and Zverev during the group photo, captioned, "A picture says 1,000 words. The rivalry is real." It racked up thousands of likes and retweets, fueling the narrative that this feud wasn't just professional. It was personal. Behind the scenes, juicy tidbits began to emerge, further feeding the gossip mill. One story that gained traction involved an overheard conversation between two event sponsors. Apparently, one sponsor expressed interest in signing Sinner for an upcoming campaign, praising his poise and marketable humility. The other sponsor reportedly replied, "That's the kind of player who elevates the sport. Zverev has talent, sure, but talent doesn't mean squat if your attitude overshadows your game." Ouch. Another revelation came from a junior player who had attended the event as a guest. In a candid interview with a local journalist, the young athlete recounted how Sinner had taken the time to chat with several junior players, offering advice and encouragement. "He made us feel seen," the player said. "It's not just his skill on the court, it's who he is off the court that sets him apart." When asked about Zverev, the player hesitated before adding, "Let's just say, the vibe was different." As the night drew to a close, the gap between Sinner and Zverev became increasingly pronounced. Sinner stayed until the end, chatting with organizers, posing for photos with fans, and leaving a trail of goodwill in his wake. Zverev, on the other hand, made a hasty exit. His abrupt departure sparked speculation. Was he fed up with the constant comparisons? Or just eager to avoid further interactions with his rival? Whatever the reason, his absence only served to solidify the perception that Sinner had come out on top, not just in the auction, but in the battle for public favor. In the days that followed, the fallout from the event dominated headlines. Editorials dissected the players' contrasting personalities, with some lauding Sinner's humility and others skewering Zverev's perceived arrogance. Fans debated endlessly on forums and social media, taking sides and speculating about what the future held for the two stars. One thing was clear: the rivalry between Jannik Sinner and Alexander Zverev had officially transcended the sport. It wasn't just a tennis feud anymore, it was a cultural phenomenon, captivating audiences around the globe.